Hello, this is AlanVenturella, LNV. I'm going to be talking about the psychic world and studying and training and some of the people and situations that I encountered. And I'll show you my little outline that I'll be discussing. And some of it goes way back to a time that people really can't remember today. And it's almost 2017. We're talking about June of 2016. But in the 1970s, it was really what I call the golden age of the psychic. People came out and there was shows at malls, and the psychics came out from behind closed doors, and they were in shopping malls, and they were advertised on the marquee at a mall. And prior to that, people, in order to go to a psychic, had to know somebody, and it was almost like the days of prohibition with drinking. You had to know somebody, and they would tell you where to go, and you'd go up a stairway or whatever, knock on a door, and almost secretly go and talk to somebody and make an appointment. And that's the way it was. But in the 70s, all of a sudden, the psychics were out in the malls, and these were more or less the professional psychics, or the ones that really were studied. They weren't the Mama Laguchas on the boardwalk, and who really didn't have formal training. These people were astrologers and numerologists and handwriting experts, and these are people that really studied it and they knew their business. A lot of them came from Europe, and they brought those skills with them, and they learned from people that were born in the 1800s. And in 1970s, I met some older psychics that was 70, 80 years old at that time, and they were born in the 1800s, and they learned things from their predecessors. Cairo, who was a famous author, wrote a book called The Language of the Hand, and the point was that the lines in the hand were actually a language, and the numbers and the planets were referred to by the ancients as the language of the gods. At a time when there was Greek mythology and whatever, and they believed that the lines in the palm, the numbers in one's name and birth period, were all the language of the gods, as well as the alignment of the planets at their birth, their handwriting, and their name, the formation of the different letters and the numbers and planets the letters represented. They were called psychic sciences, and they were methods of divination. Like I said, handwriting analysis, or name analysis, or numbers, or numerology, or astrology, which is the science of charting the various signs and planets at one's birth. And some people were like what we call the true grit psychics. They would solely depend on vibes. And when I participated in psychic fairs and places, they often couldn't really read people. That when they could, they did a very good job. But there was a lot of people they couldn't do because they could never get started. So they had what I call a large bounce rate. They had to turn a lot of people back. And I knew a guy called Barry Ryan who worked at the Russian Tea Room, and he was a reader there for years. He did a great reading, but 60% of the people he couldn't read. The ones he could, he did an excellent job, but there was a lot of people he'd have to give them their ticket back, and I would usually wind up with them because I was what they call multi-skilled. I did handwriting, I did name analysis, I did cards, I did palms, I did numerology, and so forth and so on. I did the abracadabra, which was how to numerize a name into a pyramid, which I learned by seeing old charts that were found in pyramids that no one else could understand. Now, at the psychic fairs, it was like a psychic academia. There was a flower reader. A lady would have a bouquet of flowers. She would have somebody pick out a flower, and she would go through the petals of the flower and give them a reading. And then you had the palmists and the astrologers, tea leaf readers, numerologists, tarot cards and regular playing cards, crystal balls, rune stones. And there was a psychometrist too. A psychometrist is like you give somebody a ring or a piece of jewelry, and from the vibes of it, they would close their eyes and give you the impressions that the wearer of the jewelry put onto this inanimate object. And that was called psychometry. And palmistry has a psychometric effect. When you hold somebody's hand, you also get what they call vibes. Now, I did combination of readings. I did the palms, cards, numbers, handwriting, name analysis, and I did what they call a combination reading. And on my advertisement, it would say COMB reading. And for a long time, I wondered why, like these older ladies were handing me their comb, and I couldn't understand it because they thought it was a comb reading as opposed to a combination reading. Now, the psychic science methods they actually develop psychic. And a lot of people don't understand that when you know astrology or you know numerology or name analysis or palmistry, it's a ways to a means. First of all, you're starting and you have a method to your madness. You're actually tracing the hands in the palm or the planets or the numbers. And as you go, you get this extra information, which is psychic. And the more you do it, the more psychic you get and the more you develop it. And after a while, you cross from the method into the psychic, and the line between the psychic and the method tends to disappear. And you get this extra information. The psychic methods or science takes years to develop, and you have to have discipline and study. And a lot of these people that just use what I call the true grit psychic didn't want to go through the trouble of all this study and research, so they just went at what they call cold turkey psychic, hoping that they'd catch some vibes on somebody. And I wound up appearing at psychic fairs, colleges, malls, radio, casino, and cable TV. And I remember one day at the Bergen Mall, they brought this. It was what they call an abominable snowman. It was this like monkey-like creature in a block of ice. And they asked me what I thought about it, and I said I thought it was not real. And they had Barry Ryan, like I said, who had worked at the Russian Tea Room, and I do say he was a very good psychic. He said it was real, so they had an article in the newspaper, and it was entitled "Psychic Reaches Monster." So that was kind of like an advertising thing. But in this mall, they charged like 75 cents for people to go through one side of the trailer and out the other end, looking at this creature in ice. And the guy who ran it admitted, he said, "Well, we have two of them, and we lost track of which is the real one and which is the duplicate. But basically," he said, "it is real." And I said, "Well, I didn't think it was real, so I wasn't going to comment on it." And very often I was given a microphone, whether I would be at a mall or I did colleges, casinos, and that kind of thing. And I would just start talking about the psychic. And usually when you start getting vibes, you just start giving them. You learn to be intuitively automatic, and you go into what they call an altered state of consciousness. And when I did the 1980 parapsychology conference in Atlantic City, the person, Vinny, and his wife Shirley, who were running it, had this little machine that was supposed to go off a bell kind of thing when you went in an altered state of consciousness. And They said that people tried to make the bell go off and they couldn't. And this machine wasn't hooked up to anything, it just had batteries in it. And they asked me to try to make the bell go off by holding this uh, metal piece that was from the machine. And then they said, well, read somebody. And as I read them, the bell went off. And I was like doing numbers and things like that. But like I said, there's a fine line between the psychic and the intuitive. And when you get used to working with both, you constantly cross that line from the method to the psychic, and the line disappears after a while. You don't know where the psychic or the tool begins and ends, and that's what makes it very interesting. So when we talk about doing all these various classes, numerology, kai shi, astronumerology, name analysis, palmistry, handwriting analysis, the abracadabra, which is the upside down pyramid with numbers. It's all a method of securing extra information. And when somebody really becomes an expert at these different things, they really become very astute. And after a while, as soon as you see a chart, you just start getting feelings. And when I actually do cards on people, I start getting names in my mind and things like that. It helps to develop the psychic. Now, with tarot cards, they were originally scrolls in Alexandria, Egypt. And religious fanatics were attacking the temples, and they brought the scrolls to Constantinople, and they turned them into cards. And if you look at the tarot cards, like the Rider-Waite deck, it has pictographs on it, but it also has numbers on the bottom, which is the Kabbalah, which is compound numbers. The single numbers relate to the physical changes of life, but the compound numbers give you the information behind the scenes, or the esoteric information. So compound numbers actually have to do directly with the Kabbalah. And when one studies the compound numbers, they know the reason why things are happening behind the scenes. Like a person may not be home all the time, and people might think they're having fun or they're just out or working. And when you look at the Kabbalah, it might say that they're just trying to get away from people, or that they're detaching, or that they're involved with children or responsibilities or obligations. So it really gives you more information. So I'm just giving an idea of the Kabbalah and the numbers, and I believe that this period in the 70s that I call, and I had on the first sheet, the golden age of psychics. It was a time that people came out from behind the woodwork, and they started giving the public psychic information. But these were really the practitioners, people that studied and practiced all their lives to learn a skill. I knew a guy, Miles Donker, he would describe every little thing in a tarot card. And he was the first one that really made me aware of how the pictographs and numbers enforce each other, and how the numbers really are the same meaning as the picture. And a lot of people wouldn't understand that. Like the 12th card of the tarot is the Hanged Man. And it's also represented by the L in the alphabet, as the L is the 12th letter of the alphabet. And most people with an L initial as the thrust letter would tend to sacrifice their plans to the plans or problems of others. And it's also influenced by Jupiter, which is the 3, 12, 21st, and 30th. And Jupiter has to do with Pisces and Sagittarius. But I don't want to go into too many details like this. I really wanted to give the talk to make people aware how the psychic sciences are very important for the development of the psychic, and how they work hand in hand with intuitive knowledge.